It is the cherubim who watch over you. Let your cherub be your guide into a spiritual world of wonder.
Now, people think that they know what angels are, but if you really read the Bible, you'll see that cherubs are really scary. And they will jack you up, dude.
Now, if you read the Bible, you'll see that the prophet Ezekiel had an encounter by the river, an otherworldly encounter. He dealt with beings that are not of this world. These beings were strange and they were outsiders. He called them cherubim. They rode upon strange chariots, living chariots. Obviously, we're dealing with something not of this world. Now, I'm not saying that they were aliens, but they were aliens.
There have always been questions about the things that we read in the Bible. Many of these questions come from a lack of knowledge about the culture and history of the peoples of the Bible. The modern reader simply does not have a firm grasp on the context of these ancient writings. It is often said that the Bible was written for us, but not to us. Because of this, we often try to fill in the gaps with whatever interpretation seems the most attractive. Now, this practice has the potential to affect our understanding of who God is and what His plans are for our existence. At best, we end up with some sketchy sermon illustrations. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is the very real possibility of teaching heresy and leading people away from Christ. These dangers can be avoided if we carefully study the Bible under the illumination of an accurate historical and cultural context. One of the questions that we often encounter is, what are cherubim? It's easy in this instance to gloss over the subject, making assumptions that leave us missing important lessons. It's also easy to follow wild speculation about the origin and nature of these enigmatic things. The question is often asked, are the cherubim actual living creatures? Or are they simply a spiritual construct? Are they visions, poetry, or artistic representations of God's attributes? Now, some people even claim that they were extraterrestrial visitors who were guardians of forbidden technology. With the exception of the ancient astronaut theorists, strong arguments can be made from either side. And while we will address these questions, our main focus will be on the material culture of Bronze and Iron Age Hebrews and how they depicted the cherubim. First, let's take a look at the word cherub. The Cambridge Dictionary defines cherub as an angel that is represented in art as a beautiful, fat, naked child with small wings. Merriam-Webster says that a cherub is a beautiful, usually winged child in painting and sculpture, while the Oxford Advanced American Dictionary presents the idea that a cherub is, in art, a type of angel, shown as a small, fat, usually male child with wings. The definition according to Strong's Concordance is that the word cherub is of uncertain derivation and is defined as an imaginary figure or possibly an order of angelic beings. The Hebrew word is keruv, or cheruvim in the plural. And while it is true that the origin of the word is uncertain, there seems to be some sort of consensus among scholars, beginning with Friedrich Delitzsch, that the word keruv is a derivation of the Akkadian word karavu, which means to bless, and it was associated with the Lamassu or Shadu, a Mesopotamian guardian entity. Keruv appears 91 times in the Hebrew Bible in 66 verses. We will take a look at a sampling of these verses to gain an understanding of the contexts in which we find the word. We first come across the cherubim in Genesis 3:24. So he drove the man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. Cherubim in this context are guardians of the Garden of Eden, a sacred space, and appear to be actual living creatures. Next, we see the use of cherub-related imagery in the construction of the Ark of the Covenant and the curtains of the tabernacle. Exodus 25:18. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, make them of hammered work at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And Exodus 26:1. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twisted linen, and blue, and purple, and scarlet material. You shall make them with cherubim, the work of a skillful workman. In Numbers 7:89, the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant mark the place where God meets with Moses. Now when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with him, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the Ark of the Testimony, from between the 2 cherubim. So he spoke to him. 2 Samuel 22:11 is a quote from Psalm 18:10, which says, And he rode on a cherub and flew, and he appeared on the wings of the wind. This is a poetic account of the cherubim being used as a chariot or mobile throne of God. This idea is reinforced by 1 Chronicles 28:18, where we read, And for the altar of incense refined gold by weight, and gold for the model of the chariot, even the cherubim that spread out their wings and cover the ark of the covenant of the Lord. These are the large olive or possibly pine, the exact type of wood is debated, cherubim that were placed in the Holy of Holies by Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 6, verses 23 through 28. Also in the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the end of one wing to the end of the other wing were 10 cubits. The other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubim were of the same measure and the same form. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was the other cherub. He placed the cherubim in the midst of the inner house, and the wings of the cherubim were spread out so that the wing of the one was touching the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub was touching the other wall. So their wings were touching each other in the center of the house. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. Continuing in 1 Kings chapter 6, verses 29 to 35, we read about cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers carved into the wood-paneled walls of the temple that were overlaid in gold. These motifs appear to be denoting the temple as a sacred space with imagery of the Garden of Eden. In Ezekiel 1:1 through 3:13, we find a description of the cherubim from a vision shown to the prophet, in which God is transported by a bizarre group of 4-winged living creatures with the bodies of men, each with 4 faces, those of a man, an ox, an eagle, and a lion. In Ezekiel chapter 10, these creatures are called cherubim. In these passages, the cherubim appear to be the chariot of God and perhaps guardians of his sacred space. In Ezekiel 28, verses 14 through 16, the reader is introduced to a being who is called the covering cherub, who lived on the holy mountain of God, then sinned and was cast out. Many believe this entity to be Satan. The title of the anointed cherub who covers reminds us of the cherubim over the ark, and seems to indicate that this being was a guardian of the sacred space over the throne of God before he fell. We can use these passages to better understand what the ancient Hebrew people had in mind when they encountered the word cherub. Firstly, we can easily discard the idea of a chubby, curly-headed winged baby. While biblical cherubim are indeed described as having wings and faces, we know that the classical image of the cherub is based on the puto, an artistic representation of the Roman god Cupid or Greek Eros. Many people believe that the cherubim are an order of angels, ranking either higher or lower on various scales of heavenly hierarchy. This is a bit trickier, as cherubim do appear to be actual spiritual beings in the service of God. As for being angels, well, that depends on your definition of angel. Both the Hebrew malach and the Greek angelos are defined as messenger by Strong's Concordance. Now, there are no instances in either the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament of a cherub delivering a message. Contextually, we see cherubim guarding the sacred space, whether Eden, the mountain of God, or the space around his presence. In other words, when we see the cherubim, we know that we are in the divine presence. Thus far, we've seen what a cherub is, and we've seen what a cherub is not. Cherubim are the guardians of the sacred space and indicators of God's presence. Their appearance is associated with a number of created beings, such as man, the lion, the ox or bull, and the eagle. These attributes tend to be joined together in fantastic ways. Many scholars, for instance Reverend Christopher Gornold Smith, believe these features to be representative aspects of God's nature, while others believe them to be literal physical descriptions. We know that the ancient Hebrews made artistic depictions of cherubim in association with the presence of the Lord. Is there anything in the archaeological record to indicate what an Israelite depiction of a cherub might actually look like? The answer is yes, there is. In all regions of the ancient Near East, we find depictions of guardian entities that conform to our idea of a cherub. In almost all cases, these entities guard temples, palaces, or other holy spaces, such as sacred gardens. In Egypt and the Levant, we often call these creatures sphinxes. They are found everywhere, from statues to seals, including the possible opal seal of Jezebel. Carvings, tiles, and paintings, most often bearing the head of a man or woman, the body of a lion, and the wings of an eagle. The griffin is a similar entity that fulfills the same function. It is visually depicted similarly to the Sphinx, but with the head of an eagle. In Mesopotamia, these entities are known as Lamassu or Shedu. While they are sometimes depicted with the body of a lion, they are most often shown with the body of a bull or ox. These images typically stand around an imposing 15 feet in height. That's the same as Solomon's cherubim that overshadowed the Ark of the Covenant in the most holy place. Deposits of ivory inlays have been found in Nimrud, Megiddo, and Samaria, the location of Ahab's ivory palace. Do you recall 1 Kings 22:39? Now the rest of the acts of Ahab, and all that he did, and the ivory house which he built, and all the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? These ivory objects have been identified as having been carved in Phoenicia, although certain Hebrew-styled inscriptions on some of them are leading some scholars to claim that they might have been carved in Israel. Interestingly, several depictions of thrones, as well as some surviving examples, are illustrated with cherubim incorporated into the legs and armrests, supporting the idea of the divine throne and chariot. Several bronze stands for holding basins have been recovered from Phoenicia. It was an artisan from that region who fashioned the basin stands for Solomon's temple. In 1 Kings chapter 7, we find this. And on the frames between the cross pieces were lions, oxen, and cherubim. The wheels' design was similar to that of chariot wheels. Their axes, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the plates of its braces and on its frames, wherever each had space with encircling wreaths. In summary, we find a rich treasury of depictions of guardian entities in ancient Israel and Judah. These creatures are clear representations of cherubim in both form and function. And while it may be tempting to ascribe the biblical cherubim to Israelite mimicking of the culture of their neighbors, it is important to remember that the first mention of cherubim in the Bible is Genesis 3:24. As stories were passed down among the nations through the sons of Noah, certainly the tales of terrible guardians at the entrance to God's sacred space would have been remembered in fireside tales, and these guardians of the divine would have found their way into the material culture of budding civilization.